On Tuesday morning, President Bola Tinubu, in a nationwide Independence Day broadcast, unfolded some of the achievements of his administration, while also revealing more plans to move the country forward. The president said he is aware of the current challenges of many Nigerians, including the rising cost of living and the search for meaningful employment, while assuring that the voices of citizens have been heard. The president said the reforms embarked upon by his administration have attracted foreign direct investment worth more than $30 billion in the last year, and is also committed to free enterprise, free entry, and free exit in investments. Well, joining me on the program from our Abuja studio to analyze the economic aspects of the President's Independence Day speech is the Director, Institute of Capital Market Studies, Nasarawa State University, Kefi, and also a former Commissioner of Finance in Imo State, Professor Uwaleke. Thank you very much for joining us at this point.
Thanks so much for inviting me, Theophilus.
All right, so let's look at, we're looking at the economic policy of the president now. Do you think that the economic reforms announced by the president during his speech resonates with Nigerians? And how do you think this aligns with his administration's overall economic vision?
Yeah, I think he made the point that you can't continue to do same thing all over and expect a different outcome. So at inception, the choice was clear, either to implement the reforms for progress or to continue with business as usual. And the president said, of course, the choice was the former, that's implementing the reforms. We have seen the reforms, particularly from both the fiscal and monetary sides. If you look at the reforms, of course, they are standing on two major pillars. One, on the fiscal side, the removal of fuel subsidy, and on the monetary side, where the unification of exchange rates. Talking from the monetary side, we've also seen some form of stability in the forex markets, at least improvement in transparency as a result of the unification of exchange rates, such that the central bank has been able to clear forex backlogs, at least the ones they have confirmed to be genuine. But it's also important to add that there is still an outstanding $2.4 billion that or has yet to be cleared, which, in my view, would also go a long way to boost the confidence in the markets. As soon as that is sorted out, so there is a need for the central bank to also look into the possibility of also sorting that one out. Now, we've also seen, as a result of the reforms, accretion to external reserves. Today, we have reserves in excess of $38 billion, enough to finance over 14 months of goods. So that's also on the back of the reforms. You can also say that, of course, he mentioned it, that with respect to the ways and means, the burden on the government has now been significantly reduced in the sense that prior to the securitization of the 30 trillion naira ways and means, the government was obligated to pay interest at MPR plus 3%. Imagine if we are paying interest at MPR plus 3%. Today, MPR is at 27.25. So you will be paying interest on those loans at over 30%. So it was good that they have been securitized, at least giving government some breathing space for 40 years, and with interest rates just at single digits, at 9%. So to a large extent, that has helped to, as I said earlier on, reduce the debt service burden on the government. And of course, you also mentioned it, that debt service ratio has significantly reduced from about 97% to about 68%. Okay, partly on account of what has happened, and also partly on account of the fact that the government revenues have increased. Because when you grow revenues, what happens to your debt service ratio is that it drops. So we have seen increases in government revenue, particularly on the part of collections by the Federal Inland Revenue Service.
All right.
So that is what we have seen, on the, from the monetary side. And on the fiscal side, yes, too, we have seen, some positives. Recently, of course, you're aware of the Economic Stabilization Bill, that has been approved by the FEC, which they're sending to the National Assembly, that contains a raft of, if you like, tax incentives and reliefs for small businesses, So I think that's also one positive fallout of all the reforms that are ongoing.
Okay, so in all of these things that you have just mentioned, there are people who also believe that despite all of this, it's not getting to the common man, and inflation rate is growing at all-time high than ever before. And so that trickles down to the goods and commodities that people have to buy in the regular market. So how has these policies has it helped in any way to curb inflation?
Yeah, of course, the answer is obvious. The immediate impact of the policies have been, a surge in the inflation rates. Of course, when you remove fuel subsidy and you also suddenly, unify exchange rates, effectively that's devaluation, as you know. If you devalue your currency and at the same time you're removing fuel subsidy, you would expect that should rub off, on the general price level. So in the short term, yes, it has helped to, fuel inflation. There's no doubt about that. There's no question about that. But the expectation is that in the medium term to long term, given especially when the reforms begin to take root and then materialize, we should expect that inflation will moderate considerably, and the food price will begin to go down. And of course, on the fiscal side, we also talked about what the government is putting in place to ensure that cost of living is brought down, especially in the area of agriculture. Because as you know, the pressure points, as far as inflation rate is concerned in Nigeria, is the food. So whatever can be done to ramp up food production will go a long way to bring down food prices. And he has said that there is an agri program that some states have keyed in. He also talked about the fact that the government has been distributing fertilizers, and I also think part of why we have even seen some moderation in inflation rates, between July and August, also has to do with the fact that government intervened, and then we now saw, improved output. The harvest season, contributed a lot in moderating inflation. So if that is continued, especially the idea of establishing a plant, to produce within the next 6 months 2,000 tractors to be distributed to farmers. So if the agri program is sustained and scaled up, I'm pretty sure that food prices will come down, particularly so when there are also efforts to deal with insecurity challenge. Of course, you know that the insecurity problem we have had in this country, from kidnapping, banditry, insurgency, have all helped to fuel, food inflation. So the more these things are dealt with, one should expect that farmers will be able to go back to farms, and then, the food output will increase, and food prices will come down.
Okay, so looking at the president's speech, he said he is aware of the current challenges of many Nigerians, and including the rising cost of living. How do you think the government can help in reducing the cost of living in the country, looking at the fact that we've talked about inflation rising, we've talked about the lack of infrastructure and in several parts of the country. So what more can the president do to, or the government do to reduce the cost of living?
Yeah, I think I made the point earlier about food production, because that is where the problem is. Okay, that is where the pressure is. Okay, if you can ramp up food production, and then the other question is, how do we get the money? Okay, one thing we can also do, which has been recognized, by the way, as a low-hanging fruit, is to ramp up oil production. Okay, if we're able to ramp up oil production and take advantage of the still favorable oil price. Okay, recently oil price started rising again. Partly on account of the if you like, the Israeli what is going on now in the Middle East. So we should take advantage of that by ramping up oil production. And part of what he also said will help to increase oil production is this ExxonMobil Seplat divestment deal, okay? Where Exxon is selling its onshore oil assets, to Seplat, which, according to the president, the NUPROC has approved. So that promises to help increase oil output, because you find Exxon, you also find Shell. There's another similar arrangement where Shell is also selling its onshore assets to a consortium of purchasers, the Renaissance company. So that will now enable them play more in the offshore, offshore space. So there is this expectation that all of that, promotion of free entry and free exit, let me use the president's word, in the oil sector, implementing the Petroleum Industry Act will go a long way to increase oil production. As you know, the latest, of course, we have, NBS GDP figure has to do with that of Q1 of 2024. And what do we know from that? That oil production is still around 1.4, or was around 1.4 at the time. Okay, which of course contributed to the fact that the oil sector, even though it grew by 10.5%, okay, could have done more if we had an improved oil production. I think I'm referring to the Q2 of 2024. So the point is, ramp up oil production, okay, use the revenues from there, put more in agriculture. And then there's this other aspect too I must mention, the fact that the small businesses need to be enabled. And part of what is on board now to enable these businesses is also to, apart from the interventions, the nano and medium businesses, the fact that the
Professor Uche,
the tax reforms are all geared towards promoting small businesses. So,
Professor Uche, I'd like you to hold your thoughts. We are going on the commercial break. Then when we come back, we'll still talk about small businesses and how they can survive despite the economic hardship. And of course, we'll talk about the ease of doing business. Just stay with us, Professor Uche. Of course, we'll take a quick break and return with more on Business Nigeria. You're watching Business Nigeria. Of course, we have Professor Uche Uwaleke joining us in our Abuja studio and talking about analyzing the president's speech, looking at the economic reforms that were espoused in the president's speech on October the 1st. But before we went on that break, we were talking. You talked about small businesses. Now, before that, let's talk about the ease of doing business. Now, the president says that he has the federal government secured over $30 billion FDI last year as part of his drive to attract foreign investment. Now, this also ties to the question on the ease of doing business in Nigeria. We're bringing foreign investment into the country. How easy is it for us to do business, and how do you think these kinds of investments can drive economic growth?
Yes, there is no doubt about that. It's a no-brainer that this economy needs foreign direct investments. Okay, if you look at the numbers, foreign direct investments are, have been very low, below $1 billion, quarterly. If you compare Nigeria with other economies, even peer economies, you would find that we are lagging behind when it comes to foreign direct investments. I'm not talking about foreign, portfolio investments. That we have seen, some level of appreciation, particularly since the central bank started hiking rates. But foreign direct investments have been, very low, and that may not be unconnected with the overall, business environment. From even the issue of forex challenge to issues to do with infrastructure, to issues to do with taxes. So when you talk about ease of doing business, of course, it's a whole lot, including ease of registering business, okay, and of course, and also with in terms of issues to do with land, property. So it's really a whole lot. And on the part of of course, I'm sure you're aware that there is the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's one, major positives, of this administration. And I'm pretty sure that if the recommendations of that committee are implemented, it will go a long way to improve the ease of doing business. And we're already beginning to see that. The Economic Stabilization Bill has many of the recommendations of that committee. There's a recommendation today, for example, that will exempt small businesses from paying tax. You saw the recent the withholding tax that has just been gazetted, where also small businesses with turnover of 25 million naira, and less, will be exempted from withholding tax, and a whole lot of exemptions and reliefs. There is also the issue of course, VAT reforms. VAT reforms where you find that food, health, education now, zero rated, as opposed to the previous position. Of course, the extant law where they are exempt. Of course, there is a difference between zero rated and exempt items with respect to the value-added tax. Zero rated is better for small businesses because they can also claim input VAT, as opposed to the exempt, status. So is actually a whole lot. There is also this issue of even amendment to the company's income tax to allow companies that are not resident in Nigeria, okay, to enable Nigerians with skills to provide services to them, without them necessarily coming to register here in Nigeria. So it's also one way to, free up the investment space and attract a number of investments in Nigeria. So going forward, we expect to see, increased foreign direct investments, not only in the oil sector, okay, with the PIA, being implemented. We expect to see increased foreign direct investments in other sectors of the economy, particularly, agriculture. And with what the government, they plan to, get, of course, the infrastructure, road infrastructure, and then they plan to get CNG buses, to roll out CNG buses. I think that will also go a long way to reduce the cost of transport and reduce the cost of doing business, in Nigeria. All of that in the medium to long term should, make the business environment more friendly.
All right, so Prof, of course, we're somewhat out of time, but before I let you go, now Nigeria is 64 years of, is celebrating 64 years of uninterrupted democracy. How will you access the business environment so far, so good, and will you say we've done well compared to other democracies?
Yes, I've touched on the business environment. Of course, we are not where we we should be. If you look at our ranking in terms of ease of doing business, Nigeria is still, still very low, and a situation where you also find, some businesses exiting the country, gives a lot of concern, and that's why you also have high rate of unemployment. The last unemployment figure by the National Bureau of Statistics talked about, an uptick in unemployment rate from 5 to 5.3%. But I was happy to note that the president talked about the 3 million technical talent program, and also the renewed hope LEAP, that's the labor employment program, all of of which is meant to create jobs. I think in the case of LEAP, about 2 million jobs directly and indirectly on an annual basis. I think that is the what we need. We need to create job opportunities, and more importantly, create a favorable environment where businesses can, on their own, thrive. All that the government needs to do should be to continue to provide enabling environments, and of course, in partnership with the private sector, ensure that there are jobs for the youth, which is also why I talked about the the incentive, the tax incentive that's also there in the economic stabilization bill, which is to the effect that for businesses that engage people on an incremental basis, and then retain them for the next 3 years, they also enjoy, tax reliefs.
All right, Professor Uwaleke, thank you so much for joining us. Of course, we talked about the economic aspect of President's Independence Day speech. Professor Uche is the Director, Institute of Capital Market Studies, Nasarawa State University, KEFI. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you, my pleasure.